Hello and welcome. This is another From the Heart video that I'm putting out there because, well, as much as you guys like my polished human design, astrology, mechanics of reality content, I really feel it's important to give you an update, not just where I've been, but what I've been noticing happening collectively right now, and also kind of giving my reflector perspective on where things are heading. So the last 2 months I've been here in Mexico. And this has been an incubation period for me. A lot of people are wondering, well, why did you go to Mexico? I got a very strong bodily signal and I had to basically leave. So, there were some hard choices that had to be made, some things that were coming for a long time with my pre-existing arrangement, living arrangement, that they were a bit difficult to confront, but it had to be done. And now I'm in Mexico, and actually Vanessa and Phoenix are doing very well back in Canada. I chat with them regularly and get updates on things, and they're really settling into Salt Spring Island. So I'm glad that they're managing, they have community, and I'm here sort of on a very different timeline. So the purpose of this was really for me to go back and reconnect myself. I didn't spend a lot of time doing touristic things. I didn't spend a lot of time interacting with other people here. I sort of been alone on this little island outside of La Paz on the Baja Peninsula, walking the beach, reconnecting with nature, doing a lot of detox work, getting back into my rhythms, getting back into my body, my exercise. So my vitality has increased a lot. As some of you know, in a previous video, I talked about the solar return readings that I do, and my solar return year is a year focused on health. It's the 6th house year, but the ruler of the 6th house has gone to the 3rd house, which is communication and travel. So it's a year of a lot of traveling. And funny enough, my own source connection sort of plotted a map for me back in March. And I'm like, this looks too crazy. How is this going to happen? But basically what that was go to Mexico, then to Costa Rica, then to Los Angeles, then to New Zealand, then to Bali, and then who knows what happens after that. And believe it or not, the path was laid with synchronicities. So Mexico was sort of the perfect incubation period. But Costa Rica, I'm actually doing a leadership retreat at the Imaloa Institute. And then in LA, I get to actually meet some people. And you guys are welcome to join me. I'm helping out with a free open house in Los Angeles. It's being put on by Therify Los Angeles. It's completely free, but I'll be there talking about quantum rebalancing, and Aniko, who runs Therify Los Angeles, will be doing demos with the Therify. So the link is in the description below. Only register if you can make it. So this is mostly for people who can make it to LA in, I think it's June 12th, or sorry, June 11th. It's June 11th. So if you can make it to LA, I'd love to see you. I'd love to hang out. We'll go for dinner afterwards. It's going to be a good intimate space. And already the people registered are really top-notch individuals, people who want to be on the cutting edge of consciousness. So this is really about the new thing that I'm getting into, which is frequency, rebalancing, health for leadership, because this is where we're at collectively right now. As you probably know, the world is going through a rather big shift. That's no surprise to anyone at this point in time. But what I've really seen is necessary for us to plug into is leadership. And leadership by dropping the story. So the individual one-on-one sessions that I've been doing, and in the Rise container that I've been running, that has been where I've been seeing the most profound shifts with people as they drop their story and they tune into the hologram of who they really are. They plug into that and start to actualize that into form. Then that's where miraculous things happen. Now, I live this stuff. So for me, this is part of my normal life. It's how I have built a business, how I'm able to travel the world, how I'm able to meet a lot of people, interact, and get in the conversations where the cutting edge stuff is happening because I plug back into my hologram. I don't operate from the mind. I used to operate from the mind a lot, and that kept me in pain and suffering, which is also why too sometimes, you'll see I put out something that's on human design or astrology, and then people will be asking me about human design and astrology, and I'll be like, yeah, I work with that, but that's not all I do. That just came through at that point in time because that was needed. What's coming through now is much bigger. And in many ways, what I'm working with now is that the trifecta, which is human design, gene keys, and astrology, with the true sidereal zodiac, is now morphing into a diagnostic system of how to get you back in attune with the fractal of who you really are. So it identifies your unique holographic blueprint, and then from there, it allows you to attune back to that fractal. And that how we do that, because a lot of the time you get a reading, you're like, well, how do I become this potential? These are the processes that are also coming through. And so that's where my work has been. It's been basically diagnose how to get a person back into their true self, how to get them into, radiant health, how to get their prosperity working and their relationships working and their sense of purpose online. And then what are the processes that's going to make the shift from wherever they are now to whatever that fractal is going to be? And that gap in between is where the work happens. It's as simple as that. So in my case, I needed to deepen my own embodiment. I needed to improve my health, which is what came through in my solar return reading that I did for myself. And so, I was living in Canada on the West Coast where it gets rainy and wet and it's suburbia. You can't always get the best food. You don't always get enough sunshine, and my body needs sunshine. So coming down to Mexico, I'm able to walk on the beach every day. It's very easy for me to plug in and go swimming and do yoga and work out very simply here. And at the same time, eat fresh fruit, eat plenty of fish, and the things that make my body happy. So I've been losing weight. I've been getting more vitality. I've been getting into better shape, which allows me to have more capacity for the work that's needed. And next week I go to Costa Rica with Allison, who you can watch our interviews, or maybe you've been to the workshop, but her and I really hit it off. And that is going to be my time to go into a silent incubation. That's what I've been preparing for 2 months, is getting ready for that week. Because on the back end of that, I'll be heading up to LA, I'll be meeting people, I'll be out there, I'll be socializing in the thick of it in Santa Monica, which is sort of the health capital of, well, I think the world in many ways. It's definitely a place where a lot of cutting edge stuff happens. So I'll be there, I'll be reporting back to you guys, I'll be sharing in my newsletters about what's going on. And then I'm off to New Zealand to do a bit of a powwow with Jade, as we're collaborating on more and more amazing, exciting things this year. We just are finishing up our Rise container, which was absolutely astounding to watch the transformations of people coming in there that were, either struggling financially or struggling with their health. And then they've been able to reinvent themselves in 8 weeks. So this is really the focus. It's like, what is necessary to get people into their leadership potential in 2025 faster? How do we cut through the distractions, the noise, the fact that, we're being bombarded with stuff that doesn't belong in our body all the time? And there's a lot of fear being kind of pushed out on the airwaves. How do we rise above that? And how do we connect back to our own inner truth, our own instructions at this time that need us to come and often bring something to the world that's never been seen before? And that's a big, scary thing when we've got family, friends, employers, whatever, telling us that we're somebody else. So, it's important to have access to other people who are empowering that, because a lot of the time our instructions are already hearing this. They're already going, yes, I need to step into that role. I need to step into my leadership. I can feel something big wants to be born. And that big thing doesn't necessarily have to be a business idea. I mean, for some people it might be, but it could be where you're going to live next. It could be a creative project. It could be a new relationship, right? It could just be a better relationship with your body. But whatever it is, there's something there that's saying, I want to come out. I want to sprout. And now is the time to do so, when the energies are ripe. They're big energies this year. And we can either go off track and get caught up in the mess, or we can stay on track and we can proceed. And the funny thing is with this too, is this invitation to go to Costa Rica, it popped up. Allison asked me and I was just like instantly yes. And then I won a $13,000 detox retreat in Bali. So I'm like, well, how do I get from Costa Rica to Bali? Well, they're a couple months apart. So then all of a sudden LA popped up. The opportunity to do a stopover in New Zealand popped up, and the whole thing just basically paved its way. And that's what happens when we start to follow the breadcrumbs left by our higher self, left by this holographic version of our true identity, is that it will just basically pave the way for us. And all we have to do is trust. In fact, if there's one thing I could tell you right now, it is simply to trust life. Beyond anything else, trust life, trust the instructions that are coming through you, because they're going to seem weird. They're going to seem different. They're going to seem like, I don't know where this is going. And why is life saying I need to rest and take it easy when I've got bills to pay and I've got kids to take care of and blah, 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 blah. Start to listen. Start to listen to those instructions in small ways, because they lead to very big things. I'm a living example of that. And the work I do with people has proven this over and over, that where the future is heading requires us to listen to our own source field intelligence, the connection with that. And, human design, trifecta, these things, they're great for intellectually hooking into that. And that's often what I do with people when I have an initial session with somebody I don't know and they don't know what they want. They just feel a resonance. I'll come in and I'll explore, this is what your potential looks like. And they're amazed. They're like, holy geez, I feel that. I feel that could be me, but, and then I go, what's the but? And they're like, but that's not my life right now. And then I said, well, of course, there's a couple things that need to be shifted, like this and this and this. And then the light bulbs go off, the path is paved, and then, people have a way to do that. So if you're hearing this right now, just think to yourself, it's like, what is that big, ambitious dream of service that also serves you, but serves other people, that serves the environment, that serves the world at large, whatever that is for you. And it's going to be different for each person. It doesn't matter if you're 20, 30, 55, 75, everybody's got a way to plug in. I help a lot of people in their 60s and 70s, and I'm seeing a lot of people in their 60s and 70s rise. They're rising above 50, 60 years of being held down. And there's new vitality that comes with that. And this is something I see every day. I do 20 sessions a week with people. So I get a firsthand experience of watching breakthrough happen. And I have never seen anything like this before. I've never seen this pace of people so willing to get on board, get with their own program and step out of the story. And that's probably the biggest thing that keeps us from trusting ourselves, is the story, is we have a whole identity built around why we can't do the thing that we want to do. So in order to dismantle the story, we need to work with the various layers of the subconscious. The emotional body needs to be worked out. The ancestral layers need to be purged. And of course, getting the flows of life force in the body. So when we approach it from what I call a full spectrum approach, there's 7 layers. And, I talk about this in multidimensional health. The first layer we start at is the quantum layer. We came from the quantum with a single imperative. And then that imperative forms a perfected hologram that embodies that. And then we have a genetic layer, a DNA layer. And this is all scientifically proven, by the way. David Bohm was a famous neuroscientist who basically, he was dissecting brains and found that, memories and thoughts are not stored in any part of the brain. You can take away 90% of the brain and all the thoughts are intact because they're stored in a morphogenetic field. So this has been proven. And Ernest Laszlo, I think that's his name, he wrote the book, The Science of the Akashic Field. And he talks about how there's this very subtle fabric that holds all the information about what happened, what's happening, and what will happen in the future in this subtle fabric. And of course, yogis have known this for millennia, but science is now confirming this. So this is super cool. And then below that, of course, is our genetic layer. DNA is something that we can all point to and say, yes, we have DNA and it massively affects us. But what they don't say is that our consciousness can epigenetically change our DNA. So running certain processes can actually shift the frequency in which light passes through the DNA, flicking on parts that were flicked off. So in our default state, we can sense our potential, but we actually have to know how to flick on our potential and our DNA because it's been shut down. It's been shut down for 80,000 years. If you've looked into this stuff, you'll see that the engineering runs a lot longer than, the last 5 or 10 years. This is a very, very long trajectory. And along the way, some civilizations, some people, they did find things like, telepathy and instant healing and bilocation, and, being telekinesis. There's plenty of examples of these things actually happening, but of course this information gets suppressed. I mean, recently, Mr. Putin released information about Tartaria, which is this civilization that basically ran according to what Nikola Tesla talks about. And it's fascinating that all this stuff is coming out, but it's not just meant to be mind candy. We're meant to be embodying this knowledge. And that's really part of my own journey, is to prepare the vessel to embody the next layer of it. I'm already, pretty switched on with a lot of things, but I also know there's a next level, because especially what I'm here to do is I'm here to help leaders at this time. I'm stepping into a bigger capacity. Not to say, I'm not going to help other people. I'm actually going to create more things for other people to plug into along the way. One of those, though, is that if you do, I do have a special running on one-on-ones till the end of the month, where you do get sort of all the upgrades and all the good stuff. But after that, I'm going to be focusing more on longer-term client work. So if you want a one-on-one session, a once-off, I've got a special deal, 75 minutes, $195. The link is in the description below. It's available till May 31st. After that, the link will be closed, and I'll be focused on my longer-term client relationships, because that's where I really shine with people. Is I really shine in seeing the transformation that happens after 1 month, 2 months, 4 months, and really helping people not only shift into that, but stay at that frequency for long periods of time. In addition to this, though, the other interesting thing is that I'm kind of living proof of what happens when you step into the unknown. The Fool card in the tarot is sort of the first step of the magical journey, and that involves stepping off of a cliff. That was me listening to the bodily signal. It says, go on this journey. And I said, yes. And then things started showing up. The flights were cheaper than I thought. I got, gifted houses along the way. I got gifted a $13,000 retreat. And all of this stuff, you could say, well, Dave's pretty lucky. No, it's not that. It's because I synced into the specifics of a timeline that needs to use me. The divine process of evolution needs to use me to fulfill a certain prerogative of its own. And so therefore, I surrender into that. And I know when to take action, and I know when to wait. And that's as simple as it is. Human design teaches us this. But of course, we overcomplicate it with, do I wait for the invitation? Do I wait to respond? Do I wait a lunar cycle? No, you either wait or you take action. It's as simple as that. And this is where the work that I do with Trifecta, I feel is much more effective than the way that human design conventionally gets used, because human design right now is very over-intellectualized, and a lot of people are basically molding themselves into an external version of who they're not. So the system becomes a trap. And so that's why with Trifecta, I work more with frequency. I'm like, where are you on the frequency spectrum with regards to this specific life theme? Now, if you haven't tried Trifecta, I've got a free 3-day Reveal and Heal Your Core Wound journey in the description below. I highly recommend starting there. This is the beginning of the journey. This is your Chiron, your collective wound. And it will show you basically where in the simulation is that thing that's been sort of aggravating you for a long time that you can actually bring medicine to. It's a very potent free journey, and it's 3 days long. You can get the reading right away. I actually coded this and had the whole thing set up. It's pretty cool. I think close to, over 2,000 people have done it at this point in time. And I've got a lot of amazing feedback from it. So I'd highly recommend giving that a shot if you haven't. Now, most of the people listening have already tried that out. The last thing I wanted to touch on here is what's happening in the collective. So recently, I made a big post on Facebook that blew up about this whole Aubrey Marcus talking about beyond, monogamy, beyond polyamory. And he's talking about how basically him and his mentor are extending the definition of monogamy to include a third person. And the whole thing's pretty weird, to be honest. And my response to that was, has this individual actually purified his intent for intimacy? And, another thing that I'll be very honest about is I am celibate right now, and by choice. And that practice has been one of the most rewarding practices of my life, especially as a man, because we exist in a society that is hypersexualized. And in this hypersexualized society, men are constantly pressured to go out there and, be pursuing the feminine and taking from her, which is very negative, which is very damaging. And so by leaning back and being celibate, and not just being celibate, but also recirculating that energy through various practices, I am now able to exist with more creativity and more life force. And so I'm also urging men that if you're between relationships, or even if you're in a relationship and things have kind of gone stale, is try to practice that. Because the thing that's coming in, we've seen years and years of women's circles and men's circles, but the thing that's coming in now is union. And with union, this is where two people get together and one embodies the plus polarity, the other embodies the negative polarity, and they energetically create basically a battery. And it becomes a infinite loop of energy. So if you can picture it, you got plus, you got minus, and it basically creates this charge, because polarity in a battery, it creates work, and that creates energy, and that's where things amplify. And so what I see happening is I see now us maturing in the collective to actually having unions, and these unions then become the heart of new communities. And this is what I'm seeing starting to emerge. I think we're at the point now where we're moving past, this model of, just women doing this and just men doing this, or, we're all doing things kind of separately. And now we're actually seeing this thing where people are coming together. And I'm not being, saying it has to be, a woman and a man. I mean, you could have other configurations, but I think we're also moving past the teenager, stage of, playing around with neo-tantra and polyamory and all that. And we're getting more mature. And we're basically finding that when we commit, we devote, we actually experience these deeper layers of intimacy with another, but this forms the heart of a community, that it radiates outwards and it attracts people. And then it basically, through the field effect, it helps people to come together and to put their stories to the side, to put their pain and suffering aside, and actually start to form an alternative culture, an enlightened culture. And a lot of the people that are on the front end of this I have met, I would say are from the future. And they would say that they're from the future too. I'm meeting more and more people who say, you know what, Dave, I have memories of the future. And I'm like, this is amazing. And of course, I've had many encounters, 3 very close encounters with people from the future that are quite a bit older than me, that are much higher profile, that imprinted me with some similar information. And what I can see is that us people from the future are basically holding a big signpost and saying this timeline results in the preservation of the human species, the elevation of the human species into a radically different way of operating. But you have to understand that it's not a guarantee. And that if we get caught up in the noise, if we get caught up in the ideologies of the day, we can be taken off course. And, the other thing with this is that we have to put aside even these, a lot of the time when it comes to union, people have these very religious perspectives or these very sort of puritanical perspectives. It's going to look different in the future. It's going to look much different in the future. We have a lot of people now are identifying as non-binary, and they're part of the future. There's a lot of people that are choosing other sexual orientations. They're part of the future. It all comes from the purity of their connection. And, for me in my own process, I see that as being a union between a man and a woman for myself, but I respect the choices that other people make so long as their connection is pure and that they're creating that field effect that's going to lead to the creation of these future communities. As I've said on previous From the Heart videos, is that I'm involved with some of these community building groups that are out there in the world right now that are doing amazing things. I do see that process being a process that's a couple of years out. Right now, we're learning the relational fabric that's necessary to land that fully in form. So this is a very exciting time. And I got to say too, that no matter what's happening out there and what stuff you're reading, I am feeling more enlivened, more vital, and more excited for the future than I have in a long, long time. And as a reflector, I'm picking up on threads. So, if you follow me, keep following me, because the direction that I'm heading is on one of these positive timelines. I can very clearly feel it and see it, and the results have been showing themselves to me since, I'd say really since the beginning of this year, where I could clearly see what was going to happen in 2025. And that has played out. The economic things that I said in my 2025 timelines video, the political things that I said would happen, they're happening. The environmental things I said are happening, but none of that matters. None of that matters when you're plugged into yourself. You plug in your higher bodies into your, body-mind matrix, and you go and you listen to those instructions to a T. So that's basically what I wanted to share with you. And this is the insight coming out of my 2 months of mostly solitude. Of course, I have been, tending to my client needs and my group container that I've been running, which is Rise, which is wrapping up shortly. But aside from that, the one more exciting piece of news is the Elevation Retreat is happening. We're sold out of the pre-sale round for that. So there's spaces left, yes. There's another, I think, 8 spots available. And you can see the brochure in the description below for this. This is basically where we're going to be working intensely. So it's going to be myself, it's going to be Jade, and it's going to be Aniko from Therify Los Angeles. We're going to have a Therify on site. And we're going to be basically tapping people back into their own 0 point held on Salt Spring Island, which is a very powerful portal point in the world, in Canada, at a very beautiful place called Lightwater Cove is the name of the retreat center, all organic, locally grown food. And the processes we're going to be running are to get people back in a bodily sense, physically connected with that hologram of their higher potential that will last for months afterwards, that will catapult people into whatever endeavors that they're doing. Even if that is, whether it's business or whether it's personal, it doesn't really matter. It's just getting you plugged back into yourself through the 0 point field. So if you want to check that out, there's a brochure for that as well in the description below. But I thought I'd just come on here and give you guys a heart-to-heart update of what's happening in my life. No script, just completely off the cuff, just completely data streaming the things that have been passing through me, because I haven't been very active in the last little while, especially not on social media, because I've been taking so much inward time. That will change. I feel like after this retreat, especially when I go to Santa Monica and Los Angeles, I will be doing a lot more reporting, a lot more sharing of what's going on. And then in New Zealand, I've got a couple days booked for some content creation. So it's going to be really exciting, and I'll keep you posted on the developments. Take care.